Sometimes the best thing that can happen to an NFL franchise that is in a good position is for them to have a surprisingly bad year. And what I mean is that if things don't go the way you expect, you don't get the breaks, if you sit there and you deal with a lot of injuries, what have you, and you find yourself picking in a situation, in a spot, in a slot that you wouldn't normally anticipate based off of the expected performance and talent level of the roster. And one of those teams that find themselves in an advantageous position in 2014 because of their poor 2013 would be, of course, the Atlanta Falcons. Now, here are the Atlanta Falcons with guys like Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and Roddy White, you know, and they finish with the 6th overall pick in the 2014 NFL Draft. This is an organization that dealt with a lot of injuries on both sides of the football. Steven Jackson was hurt for a period of time. Roddy White never really got to form, even once he kind of got healthy. Julio Jones was playing dominantly like the best receiver in the NFL the first part of the season, then he goes down for the year. But, part of that is just how it goes sometimes. You get the last season of Tony Gonzalez, but now he's out of the picture, you would assume anyways. So the Falcons are sitting there. You've got Matt Ryan coming back. You've got Julio Jones hopefully coming back healthy. You've got Roddy White hopefully coming back healthy. Steven Jackson maybe hopefully coming back healthy. You've still got some good pieces in place on offense, and you've got a defense that the Falcons have addressed quite a bit via free agency in the offseason. So you look at the Atlanta Falcons and you say, hey, this is a team that can bounce right back into the fold and right back into the mix and right back in contention in both the NFC South and the NFC as a whole with a good offseason and a good 2014 NFL Draft. And the interesting thing for the Atlanta Falcons was, to me, they were sitting in a rare spot, a rare opportunity for them to really snag an elite player that for a team with as much perceived talent as it has, they wouldn't normally be in a position to get without either having to move up tremendously or get really damn lucky. And don't get me wrong, the Atlanta Falcons still had a tremendous temptation, I feel, to most definitely move up, but maybe even move down to acquire some additional picks, because in part they still, I feel, as an organization, partially pay the price for that Julio Jones trade back in the 2011 NFL Draft, because, yes, they got a star impact top 5 wide receiver in the National Football League, but they gave up a lot of picks in the process, and those are a lot of picks that could have been utilized to acquire other starters and other depth that could have definitely benefited the Falcons in their injury-marred 2013 season. So now sitting here at pick 6, the Falcons, like I said, they could either move up and try and roll the dice and gamble big and go after a guy like a Jadeveon Clowney or go after a guy like a Greg Robinson, or they can move down because this is a really good, deep, talented draft class, try to accumulate some additional picks and really try to give their roster an infusion of young athletic talent. Well, I have to say this, is that the Falcons fought temptation, and they didn't overthink it. Dimitroff, Arthur Blank, Mike Smith, they didn't overthink it. They didn't try to get cute. They didn't try to do the sexy thing. They just kind of kept it basic, in particular with their first 2 picks. And when you look at the draft results down in the description box below, I really think they hit it out of the park for the Atlanta Falcons and what the Atlanta Falcons were in need of and what the Atlanta Falcons were in search of with their first 2 picks. They got Jake Matthews, the offensive tackle from Texas A&M, with the 6th overall selection. Just kind of falls right there to his lap. Now, I'm not quite as high as a lot of other draft experts and prognosticators and NFL people are, but I see a guy that was still a top 10 talent in this draft that the Atlanta Falcons got to them at number 6 that could come in immediately, day 1, and provide a significant contribution to that Atlanta Falcons organization, to that roster, in a place that they truly needed impact and help, and that was on that offensive line. Look, the Falcons' defense has been kind of boo-boo for years now under head coach Mike Smith, and I give you that. But at some point in time, you also have to recognize the fact that there were more pressing problems, too, in 2013 besides just a boo-boo defense and injuries all over the place. They couldn't protect Matt Ryan. They couldn't run block very well either. They did a terrible job as an offensive line unit in 2013. And at the end of the day, the Atlanta Falcons are ultimately going to win or lose based off of Matt Ryan more than anything else. He is the quarterback. He is the franchise quarterback. He is the man in Atlanta. and you have to do everything you can to help him out. You have to do everything you can to put him in the best possible situation to succeed, especially with guys like Julio Jones and Roddy White and emerging Harry Douglas, who had a 1,000-yard season in 2013. You have to do everything you can to better protect Matt Ryan. That is both with a better job in the run game, in run blocking, and then ultimately with your pass protection as well. And a guy like Jake Matthews obviously has a huge impact there. A guy that can maybe play right tackle or inside at one of the guard positions right away. And eventually, at some point in time, replace the sorry piece of crap Sam Baker at left tackle and be the long-term, blindside protector for Matt Ryan that the Atlanta Falcons really need. And then to turn around in round 2, there have been some rumblings about what the Falcons were going to do. Maybe they were going to change up their defensive formation or their base defense some. And it looks like they will be switching, it seems like, to a 3-4 base defense or more of a 3-4 base in 2014. And to be able to get a guy like Hageman at number 37 overall, a guy that I felt was a first-round talent. Yes, he had some inconsistencies, but he also had those moments where he flashed that potential of an Ndamukong Suh or to a lesser degree maybe a Starr. To be able to get a guy like him at number 37 and a guy that I think fit best at the NFL level as a 3-4-5 technique defensive end, to be able to get him at the beginning of round 2, I think was a tremendous coup for the Atlanta Falcons. And that's where the strength of this draft really was for them, with those first 2 picks, addressing the trenches, which is what needed to be addressed the most, both on the offensive and defensive side of the football. I think the best pick was Jake Matthews. Again, their best value, I think, was Hageman, a guy that I had as a round 1 pick. They were able to get at the beginning of portions of round 2. Again, they let the game happen. They allowed the draft to fall where it may, and they sat put, and they were able to get the best available player at that point in time. You know, a guy that I think could surprise, though, is Prince Shembo, the outside linebacker from Notre Dame. He has some off-the-field concerns, yes, but a lot of these young men, frankly, you're talking about 20, 21, 22-year-old, 23-year-old kids. A lot of us back when we were that old, or some of you that are that old now, know what I'm talking about. You always have those issues. You always have those concerns. And I think sometimes there's a little too much concern when it comes to that in terms of NFL prospects. Now, his situation, yes, is a little bit different, a little bit more severe. But here is a guy that played in a 3-4 at Notre Dame. He's going to come into Atlanta where they're potentially going to run a 3-4. And at times at Notre Dame, he was a real difference maker as an edge pass rusher who could do a little bit more than that. And to get a guy like him in the late portion of round number 4 with one of those compensatory picks, I thought was an absolute steal. And I think he could be a guy that surprises some people. My second guessing for the Atlanta Falcons draft comes, though, from not taking a tight end at all. They're talking about eliminating Tony Gonzalez's position entirely, going to more of an emphasis on a run-blocking tight end. Yeah, because that's what the NFL is all about today, right? Come on. To not address that position once in this draft, even though it was a weak draft for tight ends, I grant you, I thought that was a bit ridiculous. You know, Matt Ryan for years has had that safety route, that security blanket in the short and intermediate areas, and Tony Gonzalez, the greatest tight end of all time, and you don't give him anybody in return. You're going to rely on Tuilolo to be your starting tight end. No competition, no young athletic kind of H-back type of guy. I thought that was a bit of a mistake. Dezmen Southward, the defensive back from Wisconsin in round 3, I thought he was a reach. Frankly, I didn't even think he was the best defensive back still on the board from the Big Ten, not the best safety. I thought that might have been Brock Vereen from Minnesota at that point in time. You know, some of the other picks like Devonta Freeman, you know, from Florida State, their 4th-round choice, a good player, a guy that I think will stick on an NFL roster. But are you trying to replace Jacquizz Rodgers, or are you trying to replace Steven Jackson? I would have thought maybe you would be looking for a guy that could supplant Steven Jackson instead of Jacquizz Rodgers. That's what I'm talking about. In terms of my final grade, I ultimately gave the Atlanta Falcons a C+, because I really loved their first 2 picks. I loved Shembo at the end of round 4. But I was very surprised to see no tight ends taken at all in this draft. I was surprised to see them not address the offensive line a little bit more in this draft. I was surprised, again, no tight ends at all. Surprised with Southward being the choice in round 3. Where's he going to play? And it also kind of felt like it was a very need-based draft. Now, I could sit there and say the first 2 rounds, I don't really begrudge them because they got really good values. They had smart, sensible picks happened to be at positions of needs in Jake Matthews and Hageman, and that's absolutely true. But you look throughout the rest of their draft, and it felt very much like they were drafting for need. That's how you could really tell they're switching to a 3-4. They drafted a total of 4 linebackers, 2 defensive backs, a running back. It felt like it was very need-based, and outside of a couple of examples, there were some reaches there. Maybe a guy like Smallwood at the end of round 7, a guy that I liked coming out of UConn. He was kind of a steal there too at the end of round 7, a guy that could maybe play inside in a 3-4. But again, a very need-based draft, and maybe the Falcons could have done a little bit better of a job throughout their entire draft board of getting the best available player, regardless of position or regardless of need. So a C plus. That doesn't mean that I'm pooning the Falcons draft by any stretch of the imagination, but what it does mean is I'm not just going to throw out A's and B's like most of these mock draft people, most of these NFL talking heads will. I think that's ridiculous. How are you going to sit there and quantify winners and losers when you're giving everybody A's or B's? It just doesn't work like that. I thought the Falcons had a little bit better than average NFL draft, and hence their grade was a C plus.